The realization does not arrive on schedule. It does not come at the convenient moment, the moment that would have been most useful, the moment when it could have changed something, the moment when the relationship was still in the territory of the reparable, and the realization, landing then, might have produced the different behavior that both people deserved. It arrives late, almost always late, in the specific, unhurried, consequence-indifferent way that all the avoidant's most significant interior developments arrive, on the interior's own timeline, governed by the interior's own logic, entirely unconcerned with whether the timing serves anyone's practical interests. The lateness is not incidental, it is structural. The realization of your value, the specific, full, finally undefended recognition of the intelligence and the wholeness and the specific quality of what you brought to the connection, requires the absence of the intimacy pressure that your presence generated to become fully legible. While you were present, the value was present alongside the threat. The perception of your worth was real, but it was competing with the management protocol's continuous assessment of the closeness your worth represented. The worth and the closeness arrived together, and the closeness was louder. The management managed the closeness, and in managing the closeness, managed against the full reception of the worth. Your absence removes the competition. The threat deactivates. The management has nothing to manage. And in the specific, unfamiliar quiet of an interior that is no longer running the protocol against the force of your presence, the worth becomes the only thing, uncompeted with, unobscured, present in its full dimension for the first time, because it is the first time it has been present without the thing that was preventing its full reception arriving alongside it. The realization of your intelligence arrives first, typically because it is the least personally exposing dimension of the recognition. The avoidant can acknowledge your intelligence without the acknowledgement immediately requiring the acknowledgement of the more vulnerable thing, the specific, personal, entirely invested recognition of how much you mattered as a person rather than as an interesting mind. The intelligence is the safer territory. It can be appreciated at a slight remove from the full weight of what the appreciation is really about. But the intelligence the avoidant is reckoning with is not generic intelligence, not the general category-level recognition of someone who is smart in the way that many people are smart. It is the specific, personal, this person's specific intelligence recognition of someone who is reckoning with a particular quality of mind that engaged with theirs in a particular way. The specific quality of your thinking, the way it arrived at places the avoidant had not arrived at, the angles it brought that the avoidant's own angles had not considered, the specific rigor and the specific originality and the specific quality of perception that made conversations with you unlike conversations with anyone else. The avoidant is reckoning with the fact that they were in the presence of this quality of mind and managed it rather than received it, that the specific intelligence you brought to every interaction between you, including the interactions about the dynamic itself, including the moments when your perception was most directly aimed at the avoidance patterns and most accurately landing, was present, was real, was entirely available to be genuinely engaged with, and was instead processed through the management protocol as one more dimension of the intimacy pressure that your presence generated, that the intelligence, instead of being met, was handled, and the handling is the first specific dimension of the treatment that the regret is reckoning with. The realization of your value arrives as the intelligence realization deepens and connects to the larger recognition of what the specific combination of who you are represented. Not value in the abstract sense, not the recognition that you are, as a person, possessed of worth in the general human sense that all people possess. Value in the specific, relational, what you represented in the avoidant, life sense of someone whose particular combination of qualities was not incidental, but was, in the honest accounting that the regret requires, genuinely rare. The rarity is the thing that the regret keeps returning to, because the avoidant, in the aftermath of the connection, has been in the world of people who are not you, has been encountering, in the ordinary flow of their continued life, the specific absence of what you were. And the absence has a specificity that generic loss does not have. It is not the absence of a quality or a category of person that exists in abundance. It is the absence of this specific configuration, the intelligence and the groundedness and the non-demanding presence and the genuine depth of caring and the specific quality of how all of these things existed together in one person in a way that the avoidant subsequent experience has not reproduced. The world does not readily produce you again. The avoidant is discovering this, not through a single moment of recognition, but through the accumulated, patient, impersonal evidence of encounters that demonstrate, with the consistency of repeated experiment, that the configuration is not common, that what was present in you is not simply findable by looking more widely or waiting longer, that the specific combination of who you are was, in the honest and entirely non-inflating accounting of the avoidant's interior, genuinely unusual. The regret about the treatment arrives when the realization of the value connects to the specific, concrete, remembered instances of how the value was not met, not the abstract acknowledgement that the avoidant could have been better. That acknowledgement is available relatively early, is often present even during the connection in the intellectual layer that can acknowledge things without the acknowledgement reaching the felt layer where it would produce changed behavior. But the specific, felt, this moment in particular recollection of specific instances. The moment when you express something vulnerable and the avoidance system activated the management and the response that arrived was calibrated rather than genuine. The moment when you needed something specific and the need was processed as intimacy pressure rather than received as the legitimate request of someone the avoidant genuinely cared about. The moment when the avoidance withdrawal produced a specific and visible impact on you and the avoidant, instead of moving toward the repair that the impact called for, moved into the management of their own discomfort about having caused the impact. These specific moments arrive in the regret's reckoning with a vividness that the management previously prevented them from registering at full depth, because during the connection, the management was running. The moments were processed efficiently, accommodated within the available narrative frameworks, and moved past without the full weight of what they represented being allowed to land. In the regret, the management is not running in the same way. The moments can be seen without the real-time distortion of a system that was managing against the full seeing of them. And what the full seeing reveals is not that the avoidant was cruel. It is something more specifically difficult to hold, that the avoidant was present, caring, genuinely invested, and still consistently failed to meet you in the moments that most required being met. That the failing was not from absence of feeling, but from the specific insufficiency of the tools for expressing feeling that the attachment history left the avoidant with. That you deserved better, and the deserving was not met, and the not meeting was happening in the presence of genuine caring, which makes it not simpler to hold, but more complicated. The cruelty of the treatment, when it exists, is easier to understand than the inadequacy of genuinely caring and still failing to meet the person you care about in the ways they most needed to be met. The regret about the treatment is not a comfortable interior experience. It does not have the specific relief of a more straightforward emotional state. The grief of loss has a direction, the anger of betrayal has an object, even the shame of wrongdoing has a defined territory. The regret about the treatment of someone you genuinely cared about while caring inadequately has no clean emotional territory. It sits in the uncomfortable intersection of the genuine love and the genuine failure and the genuine knowledge that both were present simultaneously and that the failure occurred not in spite of the love but alongside it in the specific relational space where the love needed to be expressed in action and the action was insufficient. The avoidant carries this. Without the tools to fully process it, without the relational context in which it might be repaired, without the ability to direct it toward anything other than the continued, private, unwitnessed holding of something that has no available resolution. The regret is not acute in the way that fresh grief is acute. It is chronic, low level but persistent. the specific quality of something that has been integrated into the interior landscape without being resolved, that affects the quality of the interior without demanding the foreground attention of something that is still raw. There is something you need to know about the regret's content that has direct relevance to the story you have been telling yourself about your own worth. The avoidance regret is not the regret of someone who has discovered belatedly that you were more valuable than they had understood. It is the regret of someone whose understanding of your value was always accurate and whose capacity to act from that understanding was insufficient. The intelligence was perceived while it was present. The value was registered while it was present. The specific, rare, genuinely extraordinary quality of who you are was not missed during the connection. It was seen, and it generated the specific fear that the seeing of extraordinary things always generates in someone whose attachment system learned that the more something matters, the more dangerous it is to fully receive it. The regret is not the discovery of what was there. It is the reckoning with the fact that what was there was met inadequately, that the seeing did not produce the honoring, that the value was perceived and then managed against, rather than received. Which means the story you were telling yourself, the story that the avoidant's insufficient response to you was a reflection of insufficient perception of your value, was always wrong. The perception was accurate. The value was real and was seen as real. What was insufficient was not the seeing, but the capacity to act from what was seen in the ways that the seeing called for. You were always smart enough, always valuable enough, always exactly what the avoidant perceived you to be. The inadequacy was never in the perception, it was always in the response, and the regret, private, unwitnessed, arriving too late in the interior of someone who perceived you clearly and failed you consistently, is the evidence. Not that they finally discovered your value, that they always knew it, and are only now, in the honest accounting that your absence has finally made possible, fully reckoning with what it meant to have known it, and still, through the operation of a fear larger than the knowing, failed to honor it